Hey guys, so today I am going to talk about when you should start cleaning your garden. It feels a little early to be doing it because it's February and there's snow on the ground, but I like to get an early start because I have a couple rules of thumb that I do, and I just want to let everybody know this is an open forum. So if you have any better tips or anything else that you've noticed has helped you, please feel free to comment. That way everybody can learn here. So basically, what I like to do is I like to start the seeds in the ground on Easter weekend. It's just easy for me to remember. And then I don't like to put the plants in the ground until Mother's Day weekend. Having those two dates kind of just help me remember, oh, it's Easter, I need to get my seeds. So, kind of the reason why I want to talk about when do you plan your garden. Gardening really does kind of take a little bit of thought. You need to figure out where you're going to have it, if you're going to do in the ground or if you're going to do containers. That is going to change maybe what you can plant or where you're going to plant them at. We do a little bit of both. We have a garden, and then we also have a few container or raised beds, maybe is how you would say that. So, one reason why you want to plan is because you want to rotate your plants. Now, the reason why you're going to rotate them year by year is different plants require different nutrients. And there's also some plants, such as your green beans and your peas, that will actually replenish the soil. The plants like your tomatoes and peppers are really hard on the soil and they take a lot of nutrients out of there. So, especially if you're planting in the garden, you're going to want to rotate those every year. You're not going to want to put them in the same place, as well as pest control. So if you continue to put the same plants in the same area year after year, you're going to have a harder problem with bugs, with soil issues, things like that. So if you can rotate them, it kind of keeps the bugs guessing of where they're going to be at. But then another thing is plants have different root depths. And so you really kind of want like 1 year more of a shallow root planted somewhere, and the next year the deeper roots planted there, because what it does is the roots will force aeration in the soil, and so it'll keep your soil healthier because you need air in the soil to help your plants grow. So first I'm going to talk about your garden, if you're going to have one actually in the ground. The most important thing to do before you start anything is to till the garden. There's a lot of people out there that you can pay to have them come and till it the first round. But getting that first initial till will help loosen that soil. So when you plant your seeds and then the roots start planting, the roots aren't fighting to go down, which you're going to have a healthier plant then. Having that air and having it move, you're going to have a healthier plant going to be in there, because the roots can get down and have a better grasp on the soil, as well as it just kind of makes those nutrients kind of flow better. You may, if you're going to plant in raised gardens, I'll kind of talk about later on when it gets closer to planting, what do you need to do for a raised garden. Like I said, we have a couple, so I'm going to be able to kind of show you how to get those ready for you as well. But the raised gardens, you may want to think about getting some newer garden growing soil, or looking to see if there's any kind of nutrients that you can add to it before you get started. That way they have a good start. The seeds have something to eat immediately. So kind of what I like to plant as seeds, I'm just going to kind of throw these out here, is we plant a lot of kale and lettuce and some carrots, green beans. I do plant my zucchini and my squash as seeds as well. And then also your onions and kind of your garlic. They like the colder weather as well. So with those seeds, like I said, I plant those in the ground Easter weekend. If you're going to plant potatoes, kind of the old wives' tale, and this is why I do the seeds on Easter weekend, the old wives' tale is to plant them on Good Friday. So that kind of just goes in there. Now, the reason why I say you need to plan is because sometimes you're not going to have the space that you need. And it's really important to plant the plants that you're going to use the most of We don't have a lot of ground here, and I know we call ourselves the head homestead, but we don't have ground for a giant garden. And so you really need to be mindful of what you're planting and how much space you have to plant those. So we don't plant our own potatoes. We also aren't big potato eaters anyway, but potatoes do take a lot of space. So I'm going to kind of just show you what I do. And I keep this because this is also a good way for next year to remind me where I planted what. So I'm going to keep this until next February or March time when I'm actually planting. I actually will write out what I'm going to plant where. And that helps me so I know when I'm going to go buy seed or I'm going to go buy plants, kind of how much I'm going to need based on where I'm going to put those. But it also helps me plan certain things. So one thing to kind of think about is at different times of the year of the summer, your vegetables are going to be ready at different times. So I always plant my green beans on Easter weekend. And that typically means that I'm going to be having green beans maybe sometime in June sometime. And so by the time my green beans are all done, that is when my squash and my zucchini plants just take off. And those plants can really just take over your garden. So what I like to do is I like to plant my zucchini and my squash right next to my green beans. So then when I am done with the green beans, I pull those plants and I'll tell this later, but I will train the squash vines to kind of go there so they're not intruding on any of the other plants. So when you have a smaller area, it's really important to kind of plan where you're going to plant things, when they're going to come ready. And then that way, when it's something like the squash is going to be one of the last things you pick, that's going to be typically August, maybe even September when you going to pick those squash. Well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to have had what is going to have been already harvested early on. So by the time the vines are growing, they can just take over where my green beans are. And the same way, since I have a little smaller, I typically plant my rows a little closer. You're supposed to do 12 to 18 inches between your rows, and I'll do mine a little closer to 12. So I also plant my lettuce and kale and my carrots close to the tomatoes and kind of between my sweet potatoes as well, because those are going to be ready first thing. Those are going to be ready in May. So by the time I have all of those harvested and those are done, then that's when my tomato plants are going to be bigger and could be taking over those places. So the reason why you want to do that as well is because they need a certain amount of sun, right? So then you don't want those big plants overpowering them. So if you can plant what you need, what's going to be earlier, right next to something that's going to be later and taller, then they're not going to be competing at different times because they're going to be requiring nutrients at different times. So that's kind of why I do that. So just kind of showing you again. So I like to plant my lettuce and my kale kind of right, and my spinach kind of right by the tomatoes. Okay, so they can have that. Then I also like to plant my squash and my zucchini right next to my green beans. So when my green beans are done, that's when the squash takes over and they can just kind of venture off into that area as well. So I'm going to say it again, just kind of reiterating that we typically put the seeds in the ground around Easter weekend, and then we also plant our plants in the ground in Mother's Day. So please comment if you have any other questions. This is just the planting stage. So garden is in a stage, so we'll just take it step by step. But typically I do like to start planting now just so I can write down, check and see what seeds I have, if I think they're going to be good, and if I need to buy any, as well as what plants I get. Because if you're anything like me, as soon as you enter that greenhouse, you get a little overwhelmed and you can just start buying stuff that you maybe don't need. I'm also we have an herb garden, and what I like to do every year is I like to try something new. So a lot about this channel too is I'm going to be learning stuff as well. And this year I'm going to be learning how to grow herbal tea plants. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be having kind of an adventure there. So Please comment if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any other tips that you think you could give anybody. One thing I will let you talk about too, I guess we talked about the garden. If you're going to do a raised bed or if you're going to do container gardening, a lot of your really good plants for those is going to be like your tomatoes and your peppers. You probably could do a little bit of green beans, but those are a little harder to do in containers. You're not going to get as much. But your salads, carrots, lettuce, kale are really good. If you have a raised bed, actually your squash and pumpkins, I've grown those in raised beds and they do really well as well. The only thing with raised beds is you'll need to make sure that you definitely put them next to a water source because you will have to water them more frequently than you would a garden. So just kind of some things to keep in mind. Let me know if you have any questions and we will let you know our next steps when they come to be. Thanks, guys.